So I really didn't think it was possible for the Supreme Court to lose any more credibility this year, but to my surprise, I was wrong. And of course, I'm talking about the recent 6-3 decision that issues broad immunity to Trump and any future president for acts they carry out as president. So today we're going to take a look at the Strict Scrutiny podcast with Kate Shaw, Melissa Murray, and Leah Littman. They do an excellent job of breaking these Supreme Court cases down. And I just wanted to point out a couple highlights from the decision that I thought were important. And then maybe in the near future, we can do a deeper dive into what this will actually look like and mean for the country. So to kick things off, we should try to understand that this Supreme Court established 3 categories of immunities. So let's go ahead and learn about that really quick.
Trump, and there are 3 categories, and each of these categories are entitled to different kinds of immunity. So first, for any actions, and this is as to Trump or any future president, actions taken within the president's conclusive and preclusive constitutional authority, the president is entitled to absolute immunity from criminal prosecution. So again, certain presidential acts that are taken pursuant to core Article 2 powers. We can talk a little bit more about what that means. Absolutely immune, case has to be thrown out at the pass. Category 2 involve actions taken within the outer perimeter of the president's official duties. And for those kinds of actions, the president is entitled to at least, and this is important, at least presumptive immunity from criminal prosecution. So at least presumptive immunity, that presumption would have to be rebutted, and maybe, the court doesn't rule this out, absolute immunity for all official acts taken by the president. And then third, with respect to purely private or unofficial activity, the president is not entitled to immunity, but by the time the case was in front of the Supreme Court, Trump wasn't even arguing for immunity for private conduct.
So basically what this court is saying is that if you have powers delegated by the Constitution to the president, that he will receive absolute immunity. And that even extends to the outer perimeter of those presidential duties, and that will enjoy presumptive immunity. What kind of world does this set up where the president of the United States is no longer held accountable to the same criminal statutes that the U.S. citizens are? This sounds a lot like the president is now above the law. It sounds a bit more like a monarch. And the Supreme Court justices who wrote this decision weren't shy in saying that they wanted our president to be energetic and nimble. They want to consolidate power into the executive office. And that's exactly what they have done here. So let's go ahead and take a listen to Melissa Murray about this energetic and nimble president that these conservative justices are seeking.
Here in this opinion, this court is celebrating and indeed endorsing the idea of an energetic, nimble executive. They say this multiple times in the majority opinion. Justice Thomas echoes it in his concurrence. They want a president who's going to do a lot of things. And in the end, the court essentially says if the president does something that the president has constitutional authority to do, that's the end of it. No criminal prosecution. It doesn't matter if the president is abusing the powers of his office for political gain or retribution. Motive doesn't matter. And they say this, quote, in dividing official from unofficial conduct, courts may not inquire into the president's motives, end quote. This is a lot. This is a really huge sweeping sea change, I think, in the way we think about presidential authority.
She's exactly right about that. If our founders wanted to set up complete immunity around the executive's office, they would have done so. We were fleeing a monarch, after all. It feels a lot more like these conservative justices are trying to carry out the conservative political agenda. It's gross. We've had a conservative movement that has been moving closer and closer to what they call the Unitary executive theory. And it really feels like this court has pushed us one step closer to that for the next Republican president that comes to power. So let's hear Melissa Murray talk about that a little bit.
Also chilling, and an obvious implication of the court's decision here is that any communication or action involving the DOJ would allow a president to, say, remove a special counsel or direct the attorney general to terminate a prosecution, and that all would be considered an official act. So this is sort of the love child of the unitary executive theory and this idea that the president is a king. I mean, it's the unitary executive monarch principle in real time being developed for us.
This is insane. This gives our presidents complete immunity for things like talking to the head of the FBI, directing his attorney general to do things, because those are powers given to the president by the Constitution. And now they are beyond reproach. That means we can't even look into them, which is insane. And this court could not even spell out clearly whether or not Trump's efforts to overturn the election in 2020 would be considered presidential or private acts. At the very least, they should have been able to do that, considering this case was brought before them due to Trump trying to overturn the 2020 election. So let's go ahead and listen to Leah Littman speak on that for a sec.
I just want to underscore this last point. Like, the court refuses to rule out the possibility that any of the president's efforts to overturn a valid election might fall within the outer perimeter of the president's official responsibilities, for which presidents are entitled to immunity. They're just not sure about that. And when pressed by Justice Sotomayor about their failure to do so, they're like, look, we're trying to decide this case quickly and it's complicated. You know, basically, like, okay, you tried to maybe murder your vice president and do a coup, but did you do so officially?
So basically what this Supreme Court has failed to do is to clarify whether or not these types of actions would be considered private actions. This is a rogue court. This is another 6-3 conservative opinion carrying out what seems to me a conservative agenda, putting them one step closer to somebody like Donald Trump getting back in power and ordering God knows what and being protected by this cloak of immunity. This means that when Trump was directing his attorney general to go out there and issue a letter saying that they had found conclusive voter fraud, that conversation, we couldn't even inquire about it, because that is an explicit presidential act that requires immunity. So let's hear Leah Littman talk about that for a second.
To me, was in recounting, what the president's exclusive and preclusive authority was that entitled presidents to absolute immunity, like no matter how they were using their powers. The majority opinion writes, investigative and prosecutorial decision-making is the special province of the executive branch. And it continues to say that the indictment's allegations that the requested investigations were shams doesn't remove their immunity. So again, just to draw this out, this would mean that a president would be immune for instituting and ordering attorney general to institute baseless charges done for political retaliation or personal vendettas. And again, this has to be read alongside the fact that Donald Trump is already threatening to prosecute political rivals and seek retribution.
Yep.
And to underscore something we have said earlier, if the president were to initiate these kinds of actions, there would be no inquiry into the motive behind it. It wouldn't matter if it was for retribution. The fact that it is undertaken and it's constitutionally authorized for the president would make it okay. And even if it wasn't, if it was in that outer perimeter, it is presumptively immune from criminal liability until the government can rebut that presumption.
They're basically saying that our president is a king. They're basically saying that unless the prosecutor or the government can prove that an action that is on the outer perimeter of a president's normal duties is not a private action, it remains presumptively immune. I just don't understand how this Supreme Court can look at this immunity doctrine, whatever you want to call it, and not be worried that somebody like Joe Biden would use this to his advantage to keep Republicans out of power. Because based on the doctrine that they have just created out of thin air, he would be able to do so. And he would be beyond reproach. He would just have to do it in the right way. But they are counting on this. They are counting on Democrats to uphold their ethics, to follow the status quo of what we expect from our presidents. And then when the next Republican gets into office, all bets are off. That is what they are hoping. So this is just quite crazy to me. And I think Justice Sotomayor lays out the stakes pretty well. And some may accuse her of being hyperbolic, but I think she asks reasonable questions based on the lack of clarity that this Supreme Court has left us with. So let's go ahead and take a look at her dissenting opinion, the closing part of it. Read by Rachel Maddow.
She says, quote, looking beyond the fate of this particular prosecution, the long-term consequences of today's decision are stark. The court effectively creates a law-free zone around the president, upsetting the status quo that has existed since the founding.
She's absolutely right about that. Like I said, if our founding fathers wanted the President of the United States to have a bubble of immunity, they would have written that into our founding documents. We did not want to be a monarch. They explicitly did not provide immunity to our presidents. But let's keep on moving.
This new official acts immunity now lies about like a loaded weapon for any president that wishes to place his own interests, his own political survival, or his own financial gain above the interests of the nation.
She's completely right about this, too. Pardons are something that is delegated to the president by the Constitution. That means somebody like Trump, if he were to be in office again, could offer pardons for $2 million. And because that is an explicit presidential act, he's immune. No questions asked. We could literally have the most corrupt people in presidential power carrying out their own personal gain. And we, the people, would have no way to remedy that. But let's keep on moving.
The President of the United States is the most powerful person in the country and possibly the world. When he uses his official powers in any way under the majority's reasoning, he now will be insulated from criminal prosecution. Orders the Navy's SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival? Immune. Organizes a military coup to hold on to power? Immune. Takes a bribe in exchange for a pardon? Immune. Immune, immune, immune.
Some people say that Justice Sotomayor is being hyperbolic here. But I think these are legitimate questions because the majority opinion does not clearly define how we can determine what is a private act versus an outer perimeter act or a presidential act. So shame on them. I think these questions need to be asked to figure out where we're at. Because the whole power dynamic in this country has just shifted. But let's keep on going.
Let the president violate the law. Let him exploit the trappings of his office for personal gain. Let him use his official power for evil ends. Because if he knew that he may one day face liability for breaking the law, he might not be as bold and fearless as we would like him to be.
We've had presidents for more than 200 years. And I can't think of one instance where a president said he did not carry out his duties as president because he was fearful of being criminally prosecuted. This argument they make is backwards, that the president would somehow be chilled from carrying out his presidential duties because he might be prosecuted criminally. I think that is a healthy check on the president. We do not want our presidents to be above the law. But with what this Supreme Court has done, that is exactly what we have now. But let's keep on moving.
That's the majority's message today. Even if these nightmare scenarios never play out, and I pray they never do, the damage has been done. The relationship between the president and the people he serves has shifted irrevocably.
This is exactly what I was saying. The power dynamics between our president and the citizens of this country have changed. I think most Americans took comfort in knowing that if Donald Trump tried to overturn a free and fair election, that he could be held criminally responsible for those actions. But now we don't even know if that will hold true anymore. And now the Supreme Court has developed a cloak of immunity for our presidents, which means most of the actions they take while in office will be immune from criminal liability. But there's just a little bit left here.
In every use of official power, the president is now a king above the law. She closes, quote, "Never in the history of our republic has a president had reason to believe that he would be immune from criminal prosecution if he used the trappings of his office to violate the criminal law. Moving forward, however, all former presidents will be cloaked in such immunity. If the occupant of that office misuses official power for personal gain, the criminal law that the rest of us must abide will not provide a backstop." She says, quote, "With fear for our democracy, I dissent."
I think it's a pretty dark day in America. I think this Supreme Court has gone rogue. They are trying to carry out their political agenda to further the conservative movement. And now they have given Donald Trump even more immunity than he was initially seeking. And now it looks like there's more than a 50% chance that he's not going to be able to be held accountable for the crimes that he committed at the end of his last presidency. I don't know how anybody could look at this decision and say it's a good idea. Could you imagine if Joe Biden used the power of his office for financial gain or personal gain, or to carry out political attacks against his opponents? What this Supreme Court has said is that if he does it in the right way, he will be immune from criminal prosecution. And that is insane to me. I think conservatives should think twice instead of just looking at this as a win for Trump. We should be caring a bit more about the powers our presidents have. And I think this Supreme Court has taken these powers to a dangerous level. And I don't even know what we can really do to fix it at this point. I'm definitely going to be reading about how we might be able to counter this. But it seems like it's here to stay for at least a while. And the only thing we can do now is vote people into office that aren't going to take advantage of such sweeping powers. So don't forget to vote in November. That's all I have to say. So that's going to do it for me on this one, folks. If you got anything out of this video, if you could remember to smash that like button and hit subscribe, maybe share it with a friend or two, I'd very much appreciate that. If you think I got something wrong, or if you disagree with me about something, let's hash it out in the comments below. And if you want to learn more about why I think this Supreme Court is ruining America, go ahead and watch that video on the screen now. And I will see you guys on the next one.